Hello and welcome to Mobility Now, a show brought to you by the Houston-Galveston Area Council. I'm your host, Alan Clark, HGAC's Director of Transportation. Today's show is focused on access management, a unique transportation strategy to increase roadway safety and mobility in heavy traffic corridors. Let's get started with a short video on access management.
Access management is an area of traffic planning that focuses on the restructuring of existing traffic access points on roadways. Access points can be driveways, breaks in medians, and traffic lights. It is a cost-effective way to regulate traffic flow on roadways that requires less labor. The need to update access points becomes important as traffic increases over time. Access management incorporates simple solutions, such as retiming of traffic lights, consolidating driveways, and creating dedicated turn lanes.
So the results of the study have been a greatly improved economic development atmosphere for the businesses. And that is a result of improved mobility, safer driving on the roadway, and beautification to the area.
Access management directly affects commuters and business owners. Other traffic solutions, such as creating new freeways or widening lanes, take more time and more money to complete. Good access management helps minimize congestion and helps to save a lot of taxpayer money in comparison. Oftentimes, access management includes landscaping and beautification of the greenery surrounding roadways. This makes for a more pleasant driving experience, as well as to encourage consumers to visit area businesses. Pedestrians also benefit from access management, which provides for safer sidewalks and crosswalks. Landscaping is used as a traffic calming device to reduce the speed of automobiles. When street trees are placed along the sidewalk edge or in the median, their volume reduces the area of the roadway available to vehicles. This influence has a traffic calming effect. Safety is an important factor in access management. Vehicles entering and exiting driveways and making turns cause what's known as traffic friction. Friction is a major cause of accidents. Access management is designed to reduce crashes. Remember, access management is about helping you drive safer roads. Get involved. The Houston-Galveston Area Council develops access management studies, and your feedback is important to us. Contact us with any questions you may have.
My guest today is Stuart Corder, Director of Transportation Operations for the Texas Department of Transportation here in the Houston District. Among other things, Stuart is an expert on access management. Stuart, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Stuart, I know that we experience significant traffic congestion, vehicle crashes, and delay at places other than the major freeway corridors.
Our major arterials have all of those issues, and it's growing.
And Stuart, I understand that access management is perhaps an alternative to trying to necessarily make every one of these major thoroughfares wider. Perhaps in some cases, adding traffic lanes isn't even an option.
I would agree with that. In some of our corridors, really the development along the corridors is full. There's not really room to do so, and so we're challenged to look at the corridors and operate them within the boundaries of the right-of-way under the current conditions to the best of our ability.
Well, Stuart, what can we do? What is access management?
Access management is a strategy where you look at the corridor, you look at ways that you can increase the amount of cars that you can process through the corridor, look at ways you can improve mobility, safety, access to the properties, improved ability for people like pedestrians and bicyclists. You have to consider transit at times. So you want to look at the whole roadway and just try and find ways to make it work better.
Well, but what does that mean? I mean, what are the things you would actually do to a corridor?
Okay. There are several things that we have done, and we've done a multiple number of studies in our region here on different corridors. You have to look at them all individually because no corridor is exactly like another. But some of the common strategies that we've seen on several of the projects would be things like raised medians, channelize medians, improve signal operations, looking at driveway locations and the number of driveways, sidewalks, and then there are other things you can look at in addition, things like beautification. We want to work with the community whenever we look at one of these projects. The people that do business along the corridor, work along the corridor, and live along the corridor. We want to work with those folks to make sure that whatever we're doing meets with the needs of the local community.
Well, I can see why you would want to work with the people who are in that area and using the facility every day. I'm sure many times they know perhaps better than the transportation engineers what the problems are. Yeah. So, for example, what kinds of improvements were made along some of the corridors that you have studied?
We've finished several projects, and when I say that, from doing an initial study, design, and then construction to the point where we get to watch it operate. Several. Westheimer Road is one, FM 1960 in northwest Harris County.
And what sorts of improvements did you make along Westheimer in 1960?
On those projects, we did median improvements, and by that, we either installed new raised medians or we modified the existing designs in such a way that we could provide good left turn lanes, the locations, storage for the right number of vehicles. In some cases, adding some turn lanes at intersections. Intersection improvements are real big when you start looking at access management, and we were able to do so in several places on those corridors.
Well, I've noticed that also you get better arrival and green times at some of the successive intersections. Did you do some work to try to coordinate those traffic lights with each other?
We do. One of the big things that people will tell us when we have our public meetings as part of the process is we'll ask them for ways to improve the corridor, and signal improvement and upgraded signal operations are always part of the list, and it's predictable, and so we know going into it that that's something that we need to work with, and usually it helps that when we do so by the end of the project, it helps move traffic, so we always look at that, at the signal operations.
Well, thank you, Stuart. When we come back, real-life examples of how access management works to increase mobility on our roads, here on Mobility Now.
There's no place like home.
Getting home safely is just a click away. But making sure your child is in the right seat is just one of the steps down the road to safer travels.
I don't know how it works.
Find the right seat for your little one's age and size.
We know what you told us.
There's no better way to get home safely. Know for sure that your child is in the right seat. Get all the facts at safercar.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
They say that when you're facing extreme danger, your life flashes before you. If you think that's sad, consider facing it before you even have enough life to flash before your eyes. Car crashes are a leading killer of children 1 to 13. Deaths and injuries can be prevented by using the right car seat. Visit safercar.gov/the-right-seat to know what is appropriate for each age and size.
Welcome back to Mobility Now. My guests are Barbara Thomason, President of the Houston Northwest Chamber of Commerce, and State Representative Jim Murphy, General Manager of the Westchase District. We'll be discussing access management implementation on 2 important corridors in the Houston region. Jim, Barbara, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Great
And
to
each
be
of
here.
you have helped us with some of the busiest, most congested corridors in our region that are not freeway corridors. Jim, in your case, the Westheimer corridor, and Barbara, FM 1960 up on the north side. Let's talk a little bit about the way in which these studies were approached and the kinds of problems that you all were facing on the 2 corridors. Barbara, what would you say were the key problems on FM 1960?
Well, in addition to congestion, we had a very high accident rate, and our community didn't want to be known as the crash capital of the region. And it was just a dangerous situation, too many fatalities in particular. And so the study was launched probably about 10 years ago. And I think the other challenge I would say would probably be related to communication. It's difficult to reach our community. There were lots of public meetings, but difficult to let them know about it just because everyone's sort of scattered. And, but it worked well.
Jim, how about on the Westheimer corridor?
Well, we definitely had the same number of accidents, not fatalities, we're not as high speed, but we had a whole lot of turning movement conflicts. There's a whole lot of retail on Westheimer, Allen, and so between the office buildings and retail centers that front the streets, the turning movement conflicts, it was sort of the Wild West because the Esplanade openings were just open. So you could make a left, you could make a right, you could make a U-turn, you could go straight through, and you'd have a car trying to do each one of those things at the same time. And so the middle 2 lanes of Westheimer, for all intents and purposes, didn't function. So my 8-lane road was working like a 6, and fender benders every day. So we wanted to find some ways to sort of ease those movements and still give them the access.
And I think that there are transit routes on both of these corridors. Am I remembering that correct?
Yes, Metro.
And I know that at least on the Westheimer corridor, it was quite a challenge to get from one side to the other if you were on foot.
Well, we have multiple Metro bus routes on Westheimer, and they also cross Westheimer. So Metro was great. Metro worked with us on the study. We did some relocations of bus shelters as well so we can encourage safe crossing because wherever you drop people off is where they're going to cross. We're human beings. People just kind of dart across.
Well, for those people who drive these corridors today, and if they've been here for a while, maybe they can remember back before the improvements were made. But today they are beautiful facilities to travel down, at least as I experience it. But that's not what we saw before these studies were initiated. Can you tell me a little bit about the key improvements that were developed on 1960?
On 1960, we have installed raised medians, and of course there was a lot of concern about where to have cut-throughs for the various businesses because it's a very densely populated area with a lot of small businesses. So whereas some change would impact a large business somewhat, this was a significant change for these small businesses. But I would say that the improvements have been significant, made a huge difference. And then we've had an opportunity to follow up TxDOT's improvements and install landscaping along the corridor, which has really made a very positive difference.
And I've seen something similar in the Westchase District.
Yeah, we did the changes for us really were about the esplanades. We had concrete esplanades or asphalt esplanades, and so what we had was just openings, and now we built turning bays in. So instead of a place to be 90 degrees to traffic, you're now in line with traffic. Instead of one car having room, there's room for 5 or 6. We actually closed some openings where there was dangerous crossings and then created a better opportunity further downstream for traffic to turn safely. And then we did some double Fs, we did some dedicated right turn lanes as part of the process. But as Barbara's pointed out in the 1960 area, we did that in Westchase when we did our deal, was to remove the concrete and the esplanades, to bring in soil, to bring in irrigation, to bring in plant materials in partnership with TxDOT. And now we've got out there something really beautiful, and it's a nice, safe refuge if you're crossing the street.
Well, that leads me to a couple of questions. Number one, I know that TxDOT, although they were a cooperating partner, the state didn't pay for the landscaping, or they paid for only a relatively small portion. How did you all get such beautiful improvements made along these corridors?
Well, in our case, TxDOT did cover the removal of the tack, or whatever they call the cement that goes down in the median. And they provided pavers, so there was that contribution. In our case, all of the money that was raised to install irrigation and landscaping was raised through private individuals and companies. So we have a fantastic team of volunteers, and they raised $500,000 to fund the irrigation, installation, design. And now there are a coalition, we call it a joint powers board, of about a dozen utility districts that fund the maintenance of those medians. So it's really been quite a great public-private partnership that will continue.
Well, and those medians not only provide safety benefits, as Jim was talking about, but they also provide a refuge for pedestrians when they're crossing at intersections. And quite frankly, just make the driving experience so much nicer. Jim, in the Westchase area, you all were faced with the same challenge. How were you able to accomplish that?
You know, we followed a pretty similar path to what Barbara's talking about, and you know, we got our private owners to help fund it through the Westchase District, and it worked out really well. In fact, if you look now, Westheimer is now landscaped, and people have now taken our plant materials and copied it on their private property, which we love, you know, adjacent to it. So you get this leveraging effect of the landscape now looks like one big project. And so, you know, it's been, what, 15 years now. So that stuff's really grown in. I wasn't a fan of the bald cypress trees. They've worked out great. I was wrong about that. But
well, we're going to talk some more about, I want to talk some more about how you all worked as a community on these projects. And when we come back, more about the increased safety and mobility with access management. Please stay tuned.
I'm one unlucky guy. The chance of being involved in a robbery is 1 in 757. The chances of being struck by lightning, 1 in 750,000.
Please fasten your seatbelts for unexpected turbulence.
The chances of being a victim in an airline crash, 1 in 29 million. Hey, could I get some peanuts? The chances of being involved in a car crash are far greater than lightning strikes and plane crashes. And if you are texting while driving, your risk of crash increases 23 times. Now, I may be an unlucky guy, but I don't have to be part of that statistic, and neither do you. Drive responsibly.
Get caught buzzed driving, and you could do some hard time.
Craig, knock it off.
Sorry, Mom. It could cost you around $10,000 in fines, legal fees, and increased insurance rates. And that could set you back a few years. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzzed driving is drunk driving. If you drive buzzed, it could cost you around $10,000. You'll face major legal fees, major fines, and steep insurance penalties. You could lose everything. Buzzed, busted, and broke. Because buzzed driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back to Mobility Now. My guests, Barbara Thomason and State Representative Jim Murphy, and I are discussing access management strategies and how they are working for Houston residents. These treatments on medians, Barbara, you mentioned that it raised a lot of concern for some, especially smaller businesses who lived had their business along the road where medians were going in. And Jim, I know that you talked to businesses on both sides of Westheimer about the ability to sometimes improve parking by consolidating 3 poorly designed driveways and having one good one.
Right.
But tell me about the importance of having the support and the backing from residents and businesses along these 2 important streets.
Well, it's absolutely necessary. There was quite a bit of resistance. Of course, a lot of people don't like change in some cases, but there were some really relevant arguments, I guess you could say, for leaving things as they were. But what happened was a series of public meetings, and HGAC and TxDOT were very good, the professionals working with us on those meetings. We simply assisted in the locations and communicating where they would be, and then the people came and they had an opportunity to comment. As I mentioned earlier, you never reach everyone, and communications can be a challenge. But overall, I think once the installation took place and people began to become accustomed to the medians and the way ingress and egress was to work at that time, then acceptance has really taken hold. And since then, what we've seen with the landscaping and beautification is people are starting to really upgrade their own properties. Some of it's planting, some of it though is actual renovation. There's a new pride in the area, and of course that means economic health. So we're excited about that.
That's great. And Jim, I know that the Texas Department of Transportation didn't require anyone to change the number or location of their driveways, but in many cases, I think you were able to show people that not only did it improve traffic along the highway, but proved their ability to add to their parking and get people in and out of their business.
Well, you know, Alan, no retailer wants to have any impact on people getting in and out of the shopping center. They just want to keep it the way it is. What we showed them was by combining a driveway with a neighbor, they would get back those 2 or 3 spots, and their customers would have an easier time getting in and getting out. And so we did the public meetings as well, and then we'd follow those up. Anybody who had their access impacted, we would go and meet with them individually and say, here's where it's going to go. And no one has a right to cross the street. You had no esplanades to start with. We already had them. So there were people kind of used to dealing with them. And what we showed them was, this is a better way to proceed. It's safer. It's going to work better for everybody. And we made one change that I can recall, only one change of all the esplanades, because an owner said, hey, I'm a mid-block guy. You can't get in and out of my shopping center. What are you going to do for me? And we said, time out. We'll give you the left. We won't give you the right. They wanted the double turn, and we just gave them a single turn, and everybody was happy. So.
Well, being able to accommodate people and sort of customize the solution to fit the neighborhood, I think that sounds like a great idea. But I want to come back to something you mentioned, Barbara, because the impact on the businesses along these very commercial, for the most part, corridors, it sounded like that you've seen some positive economic benefit from these investments.
Well, right now it's just anecdotal evidence, but we believe it to be true. We're also planning some follow-up beautification in terms of planting some trees on private property on the sides of the roads. We hope to replicate, the pretty medians, in other places. So it really has had a positive impact. It's a little too early to tell about the safety statistics, but
these improvements have just been implemented in the past 2 years?
Right,
just really less than 2 years.
Right, but we have, again, anecdotal evidence that tells us that the roads are much safer. We haven't had a single fatality, I'm told, by law enforcement. We have the fender benders, and some people tend to run over some of the medians occasionally, but
yeah, that's true.
But it's safe, and that's what's most important.
Now, in contrast, because the improvements have been in for some time in Westheimer, there's been significant new development and reinvestment in this corridor.
Yeah, no, we're a growing area, Alan. Phillips 66 just announced their world headquarters there, so good things are happening. I don't know if they're because of Westheimer, but branding-wise, Willcrest, Richmond, Gessner, we're all lushly landscaped medians Westheimer kind of stood out because it really wasn't as pretty as the other street. Now it sort of blends in, gives us that branding. Let me mention something else. When you landscape on Esplanade, you also aren't looking at the headlights of the opposing traffic. And that's something else we've seen as a real benefit, is it's a little easier to drive down there, particularly at night, particularly for some of our older drivers, that they aren't dealing, they aren't dealing with those lights coming. So it really makes a safety difference. And you do lose a tree about every Saturday night, it seems.
Well, I think the landscaping has transformed both of those areas. Maybe much of that is still in the future for Business 1960, but I've seen tremendous improvements in the Westheimer corridor. One of the concerns I have about some of the congested corridors in our region is that after they are lined with sort of strip development, I say, what more can happen there? And I would think that property values along the Westheimer corridor have probably grown many times over the past decade. Not simply due, though, of course, to the presence of the treatments on Westheimer.
But the general market conditions, and they're part of those market conditions. I know we're winding down, Alan, but I just want to mention, because I'll be in trouble if I don't say this, and that's that we had a partnership with the Uptown District as well. As part of our team. Of course, you were part of it, TxDOT. We're kind of pioneering this thing, so I've got to tip my hat to the folks to our east who really jumped in and helped us, because saying they were part of it really helped when you talk to those owners.
And we had multiple partners on the 1960 study, particularly the North Houston Association. They were really helpful in this, and I am always pleased when I see that the investment made from sort of the public side has been multiplied by the interest and the participation on the private side. In fact, I've seen signs on sort of an Adopt the Median program. Is that what you call it on 1960?
Well, I think that's probably referring to the aspect or the part of 1960 that's in the city of Houston. That's their formal Adopt an Esplanade. But I will tell you, the entire stretch that was improved, 8.5 miles, has now been given a new name, not necessarily replacing it, but we call it Cypress Creek Parkway. And that's been an important change for us, so that we can continue branding in a positive way. And that's a result of the improvement.
Well, thank you both for joining me today. That's all the time that we've got for today. And again, I want to thank both of our guests, Barbara Thomason, President of the Houston Northwest Chamber of Commerce, and State Representative Jim Murphy, General Manager of the Westchase Management District, for joining me on this episode of Mobility Now. My name's Alan Clark. I'm the Director of HJC's Transportation Planning. Thank you for watching Mobility Now.